I built the company's digital backbone, but Daniel Murphy called it low impact to deny my raise. So I quit and deleted my personal troubleshooting guide. When the servers crashed on Sunday, he realized too late that I held the keys to the kingdom. Before this story continues, tell me, where are you watching from today and what's the temperature? Daniel thought he was untouchable in his corner office, but he was about to learn that technical debt collects interest, and I was the collector. The glass walls of the conference room were meant to symbolize transparency, but on that Tuesday morning at 10:00 a.m., they felt more like the sides of a terrarium. I was the specimen being examined, and Daniel Murphy, our new VP of Operations, was the bored child tapping on the glass. I sat with my hands folded on the mahogany table, my performance review binder perfectly aligned with the edge. I had spent 3 nights compiling the data. It wasn't just a list of tasks. It was a forensic accounting of how I had single-handedly kept the company's infrastructure from collapsing under the weight of its own ambition. Daniel didn't even open it. He sat across from me, scrolling through something on his phone, the blue light reflecting in his rimless glasses. He was wearing a navy suit that was tailored a little too tightly, the kind that cost more than my first car. Next to him sat Aaliyah from HR, clutching her notepad like a shield. She wouldn't meet my eyes. That was the first bad sign. "So, Charlotte," Daniel said, finally placing his phone face down. He didn't smile. "We've reviewed your request for the senior architect title and the accompanying salary adjustment." "And?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "I've successfully migrated the client database, patched the security vulnerabilities in the legacy payment portal, and maintained 99.9% uptime during the holiday rush." Daniel sighed, a long, performative exhalation through his nose. He picked up a single sheet of paper, not my binder, but a summary sheet he had likely printed 5 minutes ago. "Here's the thing, Charlotte. We value your consistency. But when we look at the direction the company is heading, AI integration, blockchain logistics, the dynamic app environment, we have to prioritize high-impact roles." The air in the room seemed to vanish. "High impact," I repeated. "Daniel, without the legacy bridge I maintain, the app doesn't talk to the warehouse. If that bridge fails, the trucks don't move." He waved a hand dismissively, as if swatting away a fly. "That's maintenance, Charlotte. It's plumbing. Vital? Sure. But is it strategic? Does it drive revenue? No, it's just keeping the lights on. We need visionaries. We need people who are building the future, not just patching the past." I looked at Aaliyah. She was staring intently at a smudge on the table. "I haven't had a raise in 3 years," I said, my voice hardening. "Inflation has gone up 12% in that time. By keeping my salary flat, you are effectively paying me less to do more work." "It's not about the money," Daniel said, leaning forward, his cologne, something sharp and musk-heavy, drifting across the table. "It's about value allocation. The board has approved a significant budget for the new innovation wing. That's where the money is going. We just don't see the ROI in increasing the budget for legacy support. Your role is static." He looked me dead in the eye. "To be blunt, Charlotte, the metrics suggest your role is low impact. It's a support function. We can't justify a senior title for maintenance work." My heart hammered against my ribs, a slow, heavy thud. Low impact. I had spent weekends diagnosing server timeouts so Daniel could send his emails from the golf course. I had written the scripts that automatically reconciled the shipping manifest every night at 3:00 a.m. so the logistics team didn't have to do it by hand. I was the ghost in the machine, the invisible glue holding this fractured company together. "So that's a no?" I asked. "It's a not right now," Daniel said, standing up and checking his watch. "Look, keep doing what you're doing. We appreciate the stability, but if you want to move up, you need to show us something new. Dazzle us, Charlotte." He grabbed his phone. "I have a lunch with the investors. Aaliyah will handle the paperwork for your performance acknowledgement." He walked out without looking back. Acknowledgement. Not a review, not a discussion. an acknowledgement that I existed and that I was worth nothing to him. Aaliyah finally looked up, her eyes wide and apologetic. "Charlotte, Don't," I said, standing up. My legs felt heavy, but my mind was suddenly, terrifyingly clear. "Just don't." I walked out of the glass box, leaving my binder on the table. I wouldn't need it anymore. I retreated to my office, or rather, my cubicle in the dark corner. While the marketing and sales teams enjoyed the sun-drenched open-plan area the windows, the IT infrastructure team was tucked away near the server room in the back. The hum of the cooling fans was a constant white noise that usually soothed me. Today, it sounded like a countdown. I sat in my ergonomic chair, the mesh digging into my back, and stared at my dual monitors. Lines of code cascaded down the left screen, the heartbeat of the logistics server. It was running perfectly, because I made sure it did. "Hey, Char." The voice grated on my nerves like sandpaper. I spun my chair around to see Tyler leaning against my partition. Tyler was 24, wore hoodies that cost $300, and had been hired 2 months ago as a lead developer for the new app. Daniel loved him. Tyler used all the right buzzwords. "What do you need, Tyler?" I asked, not bothering to fake a smile. "Daniel said you might help me with the API hook," he said, taking a sip from a can of energy drink. "The new interface is looking slick, but it keeps timing out when it tries to pull the historical data. The legacy box is choking." "The legacy box isn't choking," I said automatically. "Your query is inefficient. You're asking the server to pull the entire customer history every time someone logs in. You need to index the request." Tyler rolled his eyes. Yeah, optimization. Whatever. Can you just fix it? I gotta demo this to the board on Friday, and I don't have time to dig through that dinosaur code you wrote." "Dinosaur code?" "I'm busy, Tyler. Low-impact work, keeping the lights on." He laughed, missing the sarcasm entirely. "Right. I don't know how you do it. I'd go crazy if I wasn't building new stuff. Legacy stacks are just dead weight. Anyway, patch that up for me by EOD, okay? Thanks, buddy." He slapped the side of my cubicle wall and strutted away. My hands shook as I reached for my phone. I needed to hear a sane voice. I walked out to the fire escape stairwell, the only place in the building with privacy, and called my sister, Zoe. "Tell me you didn't quit," Zoe said the moment she picked up. She knew today was the review. "I didn't quit," I said, my voice trembling. "He called me low impact, Zoe. He told me I was just plumbing." "He said what?" Zoe's voice dropped an octave. "Charlotte, you built that system." "He said they're pouring all the money into the innovation wing. Into people like Tyler, who thinks an index is a suggestion. They denied the raise. Again." "Char," Zoe said, and I could hear the sound of her slamming a car door. She was likely between real estate showings. "You are 34 years old. You have a master's degree in systems engineering. You are the only person who knows how their proprietary encryption works. Why are you still there?" "Because the benefits are good. Because I'm scared." I leaned my forehead against the cold concrete wall of the stairwell. "I don't know." "You do know. You're comfortable. You think if you just work harder, they'll notice. But guys like Daniel Murphy don't notice the foundation until the house falls down." She paused. "Do you have savings?" "Yes, I haven't bought anything fun in 5 years." "Good, then burn it down." "What?" "Not literally," Zoe clarified. "But stop holding it up. If you're so low impact, then your absence shouldn't matter, right? Prove them right, Charlotte. Leave. And let them see exactly how much impact you really have." I looked down at the stairwell railing, the chipped gray paint. I thought about Daniel's smirk. I thought about Tyler calling my life's work dead weight. "I can't just walk out," I said. "I have responsibilities." "To who?" Zoe asked sharply. "To the company that spit in your face, or to yourself?" I hung up. The silence of the stairwell felt heavy. I walked back into the office, the cool air hitting my face. I looked at the server room door. The red and green lights blinked in a rhythmic, hypnotic pattern. Zoe was right. If I was just plumbing, they wouldn't miss me. I sat back down at my desk at 1:30 p.m. The office was quiet. Most of the visionaries were out at a celebratory lunch for the new innovation wing launch. Daniel was gone. Tyler was gone. It was just me and the hum of the machines. I opened a blank Word document. To Daniel Murphy, VP of Operations from Charlotte Morris. Subject: Resignation. Daniel, per our conversation regarding the value of my role, I have decided to pursue opportunities where my impact can be more accurately assessed. Please consider this my 2 weeks' notice. My final day will be. I stopped typing. 2 weeks. If I stayed for 2 weeks, they would make me train Tyler. I would have to sit there and explain 10 years of architecture to a kid who would barely look up from his phone. I would have to hand over the keys to the kingdom to someone who didn't respect the castle. I backspaced. Please consider this my immediate resignation, effective today. My heart was racing so fast I thought I might pass out. I had never done anything this reckless in my life. I was the responsible one, the one who double-checked the backups. I printed the letter. Then I turned to my second monitor. On my desktop sat a folder labeled CM Personal Docs. Inside that folder was a subfolder called Troubleshooting Scripts. And inside that was a text file, the Bible TXT. It wasn't company property. It wasn't code that belonged to the repository. It was my personal journal. Over 10 years, every time the legacy server threw a cryptic error code, something that wasn't in the manual, something that resulted from the weird way the old database interacted with the new API, I wrote it down. I had written custom scripts to patch memory leaks that only happened on Sundays. I had noted the exact sequence of commands needed to restart the encryption handshake if the power flickered. It was a roadmap through a minefield, written in my own shorthand. The company owned the servers. The company owned the code I pushed to the repository. But they didn't own the contents of my brain, and they didn't own my personal notes on how to interpret their mess. Legally, it was a gray area. Morally, after this morning, it felt black and white. I right-clicked on CM Personal Docs. I selected Delete. A prompt popped up. Are you sure you want to permanently delete these items? I hesitated. This was my safety net. If I deleted this, I couldn't help them even if I wanted to. Then I heard Daniel's voice in my head. It's just keeping the lights on. It's low impact. If it's low impact, they won't need the manual. I held down the Shift key, bypassing the recycle bin, and pressed Enter. The progress bar flashed for a second, deleting years of wisdom. Whoosh, gone. I pulled a small USB drive from my keychain. I copied my personal photos and my resume. I left the company data untouched. I wasn't a saboteur. I wasn't going to break the system. I was simply removing the training wheels. I stood up, picked up the single sheet of resignation paper, and walked toward Daniel's empty office. The glass door was unlocked. I placed the letter in the absolute center of his pristine, clutter-free desk. Then I took my badge off my lanyard. I placed it on top of the letter. I walked back to my desk, grabbed my purse and my coat. I didn't say goodbye to anyone. I didn't look at the server room. As I pushed through the heavy glass doors of the building and stepped out into the bright, blinding afternoon sun, I checked the time. 2:15 p.m. I was unemployed. I was terrified. But for the first time in 3 years, I could breathe. I got into my Honda Civic, turned the key, and drove away. I didn't know it yet, but inside the server room I had just left, a small, invisible counter was ticking upward. A memory buffer in the legacy server was slowly filling up, byte by byte, without my daily script to flush it, a script I ran manually because the scheduler was broken. It would hit critical mass in approximately 48 hours. Sunday morning. The silence in my apartment was louder than the server room fans. For the first time in 10 years, I wasn't monitoring a dashboard. I wasn't checking the Slack channel for the urgent red dot. I was just sitting. My phone rang at 4:15 p.m. on Wednesday. The screen displayed Aaliyah, HR. I stared at it, my stomach twisted into a cold, hard knot. The conditioning was deep. My body was reacting to the ringtone like a Pavlovian dog expecting a shock. I let it ring 3 times before picking up. Hello. Charlotte, Aaliyah's voice was hushed, like she was calling from a closet. Oh my God, I found the badge, and the letter, Daniel is, well, Daniel is Daniel. Is he angry? I asked, walking over to my window. It was raining, the drops streaking against the glass like static. He's laughing, Aaliyah said, her voice dropping even lower. He's telling everyone you threw a tantrum because you didn't get the title. He's already posted the job opening, Charlotte. Junior Systems Admin. He downgraded the role. Of course he did. He thought my job was just changing passwords and rebooting routers. I need to process your exit, Aaliyah continued, her tone shifting to professional regret. Since you walked out, Daniel wants to waive the notice period. He says we don't need a handover for low-level operations. He wants to cut your access effective immediately to protect company assets. I almost laughed. Protect the assets? I was the asset. That's fine, Aaliyah, I said. Process it. Send me the Cobra paperwork. Wait, a louder, deeper voice interrupted. There was a scuffling sound, and then Daniel was on the line. He must have been standing right next to her. Charlotte, Daniel said, his voice dripping with condescending pity. Look, I get it. You're emotional. It's a tough economy for people with, let's say, traditional skill sets. But walking out, that burns bridges. I didn't LK out, Daniel. I resigned. You said my role was low impact. I'm just saving the company money. Right, he chuckled. Well, consider this your exit interview. We accept your resignation effective immediately. No severance, obviously, since you abandoned your post. We'll mail your personal effects. And Charlotte, good luck finding another role that pays that well for maintenance work. Daniel, I said, my voice steady despite the shaking of my hand. Did you check the scheduler for the nightly reconciliation? Tyler can handle the scheduler, he scoffed. We're migrating to the cloud next month anyway. Your scheduler is obsolete. Goodbye, Charlotte. The line went dead. I looked at the phone. He had cut me off. He had cut off the only person who knew that the cloud migration was a pipe dream because the data structure was incompatible. He had cut off the person who manually cleared the cache every Sunday because the automated garbage collection had a bug that caused memory leaks. Tyler can handle it, I whispered to the empty room. I felt a strange sensation wash over me. It wasn't fear anymore. It was the grim satisfaction of watching someone unknowingly pull the pin on a grenade and then put it in their pocket. The first few days were a blur of panic and strange, unsettling freedom. I spent Thursday and Friday updating my resume and drinking too much coffee. I kept waiting for the phone to ring, for Tyler to call and ask why the API was returning null values, or for Aaliyah to call and say it was all a mistake. But the phone stayed silent. By Sunday morning, the phantom limb syndrome was in full effect. Sundays were usually my busiest days, paradoxically. While the office was closed, the servers were doing their heavy lifting, batch processing the weekly invoices, archiving the logs, and syncing the warehouse inventory with the front-end app. At 10:00 a.m., I was sitting on my sister Zoe's porch, a mug of tea in my hand. The sun was shining, birds were chirping, it was disgusting. I wanted to be in a dark room looking at a terminal. Stop it, Zoe said without looking up from her book. Stop what? You're twitching, you're mentally checking the server load. I sighed and slumped back in the wicker chair. It's the reconciliation window. Right now, the legacy database is trying to handshake with the new SQL server. Usually, it hangs at 10:15 because of a timestamp error. I have to manually override it. And who is doing that today? Zoe asked. Ideally, Tyler, realistically, no one. So what happens? The buffer fills up, I said, tracing the rim of my mug. The temporary data doesn't get written to the disk. It just sits in the RAM. Eventually, the RAM runs out, and then I made an exploding motion with my hand. And that's their problem, Zoe said firmly. You are not the designated fixer anymore. You are Charlotte Morris, unemployed lady of leisure. Drink your tea. I tried to relax. I really did. But I knew the architecture of that system better than I knew my own body. I could visualize the data packets piling up like cars at a toll booth where the gate wouldn't open. 11:00 a.m. passed. Noon passed. Maybe they fixed it, I muttered. Maybe Tyler actually looked at the documentation before I left. But I knew I had deleted the documentation. The only copy was in my head. At 2:00 p.m., my phone buzzed. I jumped, spilling hot tea on my jeans. I scrambled to grab it. It was a notification from LinkedIn. Congratulate Daniel Murphy on 3 months as VP of Operations. I threw the phone back onto the table. I hate technology. You love technology, Zoe corrected. You hate idiots. The afternoon stretched on. The silence from the company was becoming ominous. If the system had crashed at 10:15, why hadn't anyone noticed yet? Then I remembered. It was Sunday. The warehouse was closed. The executives were at brunch. The only people using the app were customers placing orders for next week delivery. The front end, the pretty app that Tyler built, would still be working. It would take orders, smile at the customers, and say thank you. But the back end, the connection to the inventory, that was dead. The orders were going into a black hole. They were being accepted but not recorded. They were selling inventory they didn't have, to customers they couldn't track, using a system that was slowly eating its own memory. It wasn't just a crash, it was a silent corruption. The explosion didn't happen with a bang. It happened with a tweet. It was 7:30 p.m. on Sunday evening. I was back at my apartment, scrolling through Twitter, I refused to call it X, when I saw a trending hashtag in my local area, Shop Quick Down. Shop Quick was their company name. I clicked the tag. The feed was a disaster zone. At Angry Customer 99, just ordered $200 of groceries for delivery tomorrow, got a confirmation, and now the app says, user not found. WTH. At Tech Guy Z, looks like ShopQuick's API is returning 500 errors. Their entire backend just vanished. At Sarah J, is anyone else's app crashing when they try to check out? It just took my money and closed. I sat up straight, my heart racing. It had happened. The buffer had overflowed, the service had crashed, and because there was no failover script, because I was the failover script, the database had likely locked itself down to prevent corruption. It was safe mode, the red light. My phone buzzed. It wasn't a notification this time, it was a call. Tyler. I stared at the name. Tyler never called. He texted, he slacked, he annoyed, but he never called. I let it go to voicemail. 30 seconds later, it rang again. Tyler. I let it go to voicemail. A text message popped up at the top of my screen. Tyler, hey Char, you around? Quick cue about the server. I didn't reply. 5 minutes later, the phone rang again. Aaliyah HR. They were going down the list. Tyler had panicked and called HR. HR was calling me. I picked up the phone, but I didn't say hello. I just listened. Charlotte, oh thank God. Aaliyah sounded breathless like she had been running. Charlotte, are you there? I'm here, Aaliyah. It's Sunday night. Why are you calling? Something is wrong, she stammered. Daniel is screaming at Tyler. The website is down. The warehouse system is down. Tyler says the server is refusing connections. He says you changed the password. I didn't change any passwords, I said calm, channeling the ice-cold demeanor of every server I had ever maintained. I just left. Well, he can't get in. He says it's asking for a root override key. Charlotte, they're losing $10,000 a minute. Daniel wants to know the key. The root override key, I said slowly. is generated dynamically based on the troubleshooting protocol. It's in the documentation. What documentation? Aaliyah cried. Tyler says the folder is empty. He says you deleted everything. I deleted my personal notes, Aaliyah. The company documentation is on the wiki. The wiki hasn't been updated since 2019, she yelled, her professional veneer cracking completely. Charlotte, please, Daniel is threatening to sue. He says if you don't give him the code, he's calling the police. The police? I laughed. It was a sharp, bitter sound. Tell Daniel that incompetence isn't a crime, but harassment is. I don't work there. I don't have the codes. And I suggest he stops threatening the only person who knows how to turn the lights back on. I hung up. My hands were trembling, not from fear, but from adrenaline. The phone rang again immediately. Daniel Murphy. I stared at the screen. The king was calling the peasant. The visionary was calling the plumber. I pressed the volume button on the side of my phone, silencing the ring. I watched the screen light up the dark room, pulsing like a warning beacon. Let it burn, I thought. Let it all burn. I went to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of wine. I had a feeling tomorrow was going to be a very expensive day for someone. Monday morning arrived with the subtle menace of a storm front. I woke up at 7:00 a.m., not to an alarm, but to the silence of a phone that had finally stopped ringing. I checked the log, 42 missed calls, 27 from Daniel, 10 from Tyler, 5 from Aaliyah. I made coffee, the dark roast smelling like freedom, and turned on the local news. It was worse than I thought. Reports of a massive data breach at logistics giant ShopQuick have left thousands of customers in the dark. While the company claims it is a minor technical hiccup, sources say the entire order processing system has been offline for over 12 hours. I sipped my coffee. Minor technical hiccup. That was Daniel's PR spin. At 8:15 a.m., the knocking started. It wasn't a polite tap. It was a heavy, authoritative pounding on my apartment door. I looked through the peephole. It wasn't the police. It was a courier. I opened the door, keeping the chain latched. Yes. Charlotte Morris? The courier looked tired. He held up a thick envelope with red lettering, urgent/legal. Service of process. I took the envelope. He didn't even wait for a signature. He just ran back to his van. I tore it open. It was a cease and desist letter, drafted on Sunday night by the company's legal team. It accused me of malicious interference with business operations, theft of intellectual property, and cyber sabotage. It demanded the immediate return of all access keys and threatened a lawsuit seeking damages in excess of $5 million. My hands shook, but this time it wasn't adrenaline. It was fear. $5 million, they were trying to bury me. My phone rang again. Unknown number. I answered it. Did you get the letter, Charlotte? It was Daniel. His voice sounded ragged, like he had been screaming for hours. I got it, I said, leaning against my kitchen counter for support. It's full of lies, Daniel. I didn't sabotage anything. I just quit. You deleted the protocols, Daniel roared. The audio clipped. He was shouting directly into his receiver. Tyler says the server is locked in a dead man's switch loop. It's asking for a passphrase that doesn't exist in the documentation. You set a trap. It's not a trap, I said, my voice rising. It's the failsafe for the encryption module. I wrote it to prevent unauthorized access if the system detected a breach. It triggers if the maintenance script doesn't run for 24 hours. If you had read my notes, the ones you said were low impact, you would know the passphrase. Give it to me, he demanded. Right now, over the phone, and maybe I'll tell legal to pause the filing. You're threatening to sue me for $5 million, Daniel. I'm not giving you anything. Charlotte, listen to me. His voice dropped to a sinister hiss. We are in the middle of due diligence for the merger. If the auditors see the system is down, the deal dies. If the deal dies, I lose my bonus. If I lose my bonus because of you, I will spend every penny I have making sure you never work in this industry again. You already told me I was worthless, I said. You can't fire me twice. I can destroy you, he spat. Give me the code. I can't, I stammered. Not like this. Then see you in court. He hung up. I stood there, the legal threat heavy in my hand. He was bluffing about the lawsuit, maybe, but he had the money to bleed me dry in legal fees before a judge ever threw it out. I was a systems architect, not a fighter. I didn't know how to play this game. But I knew someone who did. I grabbed my phone and scrolled past the endless missed calls from ShopQuick until I found a contact I hadn't used in 3 years. Theo Rogers. Theo Rogers didn't have an office. He had a presence. I met him at a high-end espresso bar downtown, a place where the coffee cost more than my hourly wage used to be. Theo was sitting in the back corner, wearing a charcoal suit that looked like it was woven from smoke and money. He was 45 now, his hair graying at the temples, but his eyes were as sharp as they had been when he was my mentor, before he left engineering to go into crisis management. Charlotte, he said, not standing up but gesturing for me to sit. You look like you've seen a ghost, or a subpoena. I slid the red envelope across the marble table. Daniel Murphy sent this via courier this morning. Theo opened it, his eyes scanning the legalese. He didn't look worried. In fact, a small, predatory smile touched the corner of his mouth. Malicious interference, he read aloud. Cute. They're trying to scare you into submission. Standard bully tactics. He said he'd sue me for $5 million, I whispered. Theo, I deleted my notes, my personal notes. Did I break the law? Theo looked up. Did you delete source code from the repository? No. Did you delete company data, customer lists, invoices, financials? No, just my text files, my cheat sheets on how to fix their bugs. And did your employment contract state that personal notes created for self-reference are company property? I don't know. It was a standard contract. Theo pulled a tablet from his briefcase. I took the liberty of pulling your old contract from the state database, benefits of being me. Clause 14b, employee retains rights to any intellectual property created outside of scope of direct assignment, provided it is not incorporated into the final product. Your notes weren't the product, Charlotte. They were the instruction manual for the product. And unless they paid you specifically to write a manual, which they didn't, because Daniel called your work low impact, those notes are yours. He tossed the legal threat back onto the table like it was a napkin. They are drowning, Theo said calmly. I checked the market. ShopQuick's valuation has dropped 15% since the market opened. They aren't suing you because they have a case. They're threatening you because they are desperate. So what do I do? Ignore them? God, no, Theo laughed. We answer them, but not as Charlotte the employee. We answer them as Charlotte the consultant. He leaned forward, his voice lowering. Here is what's going to happen. I am going to call Daniel. I am going to tell him that I represent you. I am going to explain that any attempt to sue will result in a countersuit for constructive dismissal and hostile work environment. And then, I am going to offer them a solution. A solution. You, Theo said. You are the solution. They need the magic words to unlock their server. You have the words. We are going to sell them those words. Daniel won't pay, I said. He's too proud. Pride has a price tag, Theo said, checking his watch. And right now, the price is rising by the minute. Tyler, the whiz kid, just posted on Stack Overflow asking how to bypass a SHA-256 encryption lock on a legacy SQL server. He's panicking. He's about to try a hard reset. My eyes widened. If he does a hard reset on that server without flushing the cache. Data corruption, Theo guessed. Total loss, I corrected. The encryption keys will scramble. The client database will be unreadable. Forever. Theo's smile vanished. He pulled out his phone. Then we don't have time to play nice. We need to stop them before they commit corporate suicide. He dialed a number. He put it on speaker. This is Daniel Murphy, Daniel's voice barked. He sounded breathless. Mr. Murphy, Theo's voice was smooth, like velvet wrapped around a brick. "My name is Theo Rogers. I am retained counsel for Ms. Charlotte Morris. I understand you've been harassing my client with frivolous legal threats while your server room is currently—" How should I put this? Melting down. There was a stunned silence on the other end. "Who is this?" Daniel demanded. "The man who is about to save your career," Theo said. "Or watch it burn. Your choice. You have 30 seconds to decide if you want to talk to me, or if you want to keep letting a 24-year-old guess the password to a multi-million-dollar database." The conference room at Shop Quick looked exactly the same as it had 6 days ago, but the atmosphere had shifted entirely. Before, I was the specimen in the jar. Now, I was the doctor, and the patient was bleeding out on the table. I walked in flanked by Theo. Daniel looked terrible. His tie was loosened, his eyes were bloodshot, and he had a sheen of sweat on his forehead that the air conditioning couldn't fix. Tyler was sitting in the corner, head in his hands, looking like a child who had broken a vase. Aaliyah was there too, looking pale. "You have some nerve coming back here," Daniel hissed as we sat down, but there was no heat in it. He was defeated. "My client is here as a courtesy," Theo said, placing a single, thin folder on the table. "To assist with a critical system failure caused by inadequate staffing decisions." "Just give us the code," Daniel snapped. "We know you know it." "I do know it," I said, speaking for the first time. My voice was steady. "It's a 20-character alphanumeric string derived from the original server installation date and the kernel version. It's not something you can guess." "Great," Daniel said, reaching for a pen. "What is it?" Theo put his hand over Daniel's notepad. "Not so fast. We need to discuss the fee." "Fee?" Daniel laughed incredulously. "She's an employee, or she was. This is part of her job." "She resigned," Theo corrected. "And you accepted it. You even waived the notice period. She is currently a private citizen. If you want her expertise, you have to hire her as an independent contractor." Daniel grit his teeth. "Fine, we'll pay you your old hourly rate. What was it? 45 an hour." I looked at Theo. He didn't blink. "The rate," Theo said, "is $500 an hour." "That's extortion." Daniel slammed his hand on the table. "Plus," Theo continued, ignoring the outburst, "a one-time emergency consultation fee of $50,000, payable immediately via wire transfer." The room went silent. Tyler made a small choking sound in the corner. "You're insane," Daniel whispered. "I can't authorize that. The board would crucify me." "The board," Theo said, leaning back, "is currently wondering why the merger audit is stalled. I imagine they would be very interested to know that the only person who can fix it was driven out of the company last week because you deemed her low impact." Theo pulled out his phone. "Shall we call them? I have the chairman's number right here." Daniel stared at Theo. Then he looked at me. He looked at the server status screen on the wall, which was currently displaying a giant red system locked warning. "Tyler," Daniel said, his voice trembling, "can you bypass it?" Tyler looked up, his face pale. I tried everything, Daniel. If I try again, the system wipes itself. I don't know the key." Daniel closed his eyes. He took a deep, shuddering breath. 50,000, Daniel said, his voice hollow, "and 500 an hour." "And an apology," I said. Daniel's eyes snapped open. "What?" "I want a written retraction of the low-impact designation in my personnel file," I said, "and I want you to say it. Right now, admit that you were wrong." Theo looked at me, surprised but impressed. Daniel looked around the room. He looked at Aaliyah, who was watching him with wide eyes. He looked at Tyler. He was cornered. Daniel choked on the words. "I underestimated the complexity of the legacy architecture." "That's passive voice, Daniel," I said. "Try again." His face turned a deep shade of red. The veins in his neck bulged. "I was wrong," he rasped. "Your role was critical. I need you to fix it." I looked at Theo. He nodded and slid the contract across the TA. "Bleh." "Sign here," Theo said. Daniel signed. His hand was shaking so badly, the signature looked like a seismograph of an earthquake. "Aaliyah," Theo said, "process the wire. Once we have confirmation of funds, Charlotte will type the password." 10 minutes later, Aaliyah's phone dinged. "Funds received." I stood up. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just walked over to the laptop connected to the terminal. I typed, "SUDO unlock legacy key 882 alpha." I pressed enter. On the big screen, the red system locked banner vanished. A stream of green text began to scroll rapidly. The fans in the server room down the hall whirred to life, changing pitch as the processors kicked in. "System restoring," Tyler whispered in disbelief. "It's handshake, it's working." I turned to Daniel. He was slumped in his chair, looking smaller than I had ever seen him. "The meter is running, Daniel," I said. "Now, let's talk about the database corruption you caused while I was gone." The fan noise in the server room was a roar, a physical weight that pressed against my ears. I was back in my element, sitting on a folding chair in the freezing cold aisle between racks 4 and 5, my laptop hardwired into the mainframe. Daniel was pacing in the hallway outside the glass door, watching me like a zoo animal. He wasn't allowed in. "Security protocol," I had told him with a straight face. "Only authorized personnel." I had restored the connection, but the system was still sluggish. The database was churning, trying to reconcile the missing 48 hours of transactions, but something wasn't right. The glitch that had caused the crash, the memory buffer overflow, have happened this fast. Even without my maintenance script, the server had enough capacity to run for at least a week before filling up. For it to crash in 2 days meant something else was eating the memory. Something massive. I pulled up the root logs. I filtered for the weekend. There it was. At 2:00 a.m. on Saturday, a process labeled SYS opt DM v2 had initiated. It had ramped up CPU usage to 95%. "What is DMV2? I muttered. I traced the source of the executable. It wasn't part of the warehouse package. It wasn't part of the accounting software. It was a standalone script installed 3 months ago, coinciding exactly with Daniel's promotion to VP. I opened the code. It was obfuscated, hidden behind layers of fake headers, but I knew this architecture. I stripped away the camouflage. It wasn't an optimization script. It was a cryptocurrency miner. My jaw dropped. Daniel Murphy, the man who preached fiscal responsibility and ROI, had turned the company's legacy server, the one he called useless plumbing, into his personal Bitcoin mining rig. He was using company electricity and company hardware to generate personal wealth, masking the power consumption as server overhead. That's why he didn't want to upgrade the legacy hardware. He needed the raw processing power of the old mainframes, which were less monitored than the new cloud instances. And that's why the system crashed. When the weekend order volume spiked, the miner refused to throttle down. The server tried to do 2 things at once, process orders and mine crypto, and it had a stroke. I didn't just have the password, I had the smoking gun. The door behind me opened. It wasn't Daniel. It was a group of 3 men in gray suits, the auditors. "Ms. Morris?" the lead auditor asked. "I'm with the acquiring firm. Daniel tells us the system is fully operational and the data integrity is 100%. We need you to sign off on this certification so we can close the deal by 5:00 p.m. He held out a clipboard. I looked through the glass wall. Daniel was standing there, staring at me. His face was pale. He held up a hand, a subtle stop motion. He knew that if I looked deep enough, I would find it. He just didn't know I had already found it. I looked at the auditor. "I can't sign this." "Why not?" "Because the data isn't clean," I said, loud enough for my voice to carry into the hallway. "There is unauthorized software running on the root directory. It compromises the financial validity of the entire quarter." Daniel burst through the door. "She's lying, she's disgruntled, get her out of here." "I'm not lying," I said, turning my laptop screen toward the auditors. Here is the process ID. Here is the wallet address it's sending the coins to. And here is the installation log, authorized by user D. Murphy admin. The lead auditor adjusted his glasses. He leaned in, he looked at the code, then he looked at Daniel. "Mr. Murphy," the auditor said, his voice ice cold, "is this accurate?" It's a proof of concept," Daniel stammered, sweating profusely in the refrigerated air. "We were testing blockchain integration." "By mining into a personal wallet?" the auditor asked. He pulled out his phone. "I need to call the partners. The deal is on hold, indefinitely." The next hour was a slow motion car crash. The auditors didn't just pause the deal, they nuked it. Within 20 minutes, the news leaked to the financial blogs. ShopQuick acquisition halted due to financial irregularities. The stock price, which had been propped up by the merger rumors, didn't just dip, it fell off a cliff. It dropped 40% in 10 minutes. Trading was halted. Daniel was in the conference room with the board of directors, via Zoom, and the legal team. I was sitting in the lobby with Theo, eating a bagel I had found in the break room. "You realized you just killed the company, right?" Theo asked, sipping an espresso. He didn't look upset. He looked like a chess player who had just made it in 3. "Daniel killed the company," I said. "I just turned on the lights." "True, but here is the interesting part," Theo said, tapping his tablet. "Because the merger failed, ShopQuick is technically insolvent. They have no liquidity. They can't make payroll next week." "So I'm not getting my $50,000, I asked, feeling a spike of panic. "Oh, you're getting something better," Theo smiled. "See, Daniel signed my contract. Clause 8 states that in the event of non-payment of consultant fees, the consultant retains a lien on all intellectual property created or restored during the service period." He looked at me, his eyes gleaming. "You just restored the entire backend. They can't pay you, so technically, you own the backend." The conference room door opened. Security guards walked out, flanking Daniel. He wasn't wearing his jacket. He was carrying a cardboard box. He stopped when he saw me. He looked aged, deflated. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a terrifying emptiness. "You happy?" he rasped. "Everyone loses. The company is bankrupt. Tyler is out of a job. Aaliyah is out of a job. I hope you enjoyed your revenge, Charlotte." "I didn't want revenge, Daniel," I said, standing up to meet his gaze. "I wanted a raise. I wanted respect. You're the one who decided that was too expensive." He stared at me for a moment, then shook his head and walked toward the elevators. Aaliyah came out next. She looked terrified. "Charlotte," she said, tears in her eyes. "They're freezing operations. They're saying we might close by Friday. What are we going to do?" I looked at Aaliyah. I looked at the server room, where my code was still humming, keeping the lights on even as the corporation crumbled around it. "Theo," I said quietly, "if I own the backend, and the backend is the only thing that works, does that mean I can license it?" Theo nodded. "The acquiring firm still wants the logistics network. They just don't want the liability of ShopQuick or Daniel's fraud. If someone, a third party, owned the tech and offered to run it as a service." I looked at Aaliyah. "Don't pack your desk yet, Aaliyah. I think I might be hiring." The sign on the door no longer said ShopQuick. It said Morris Systems and Logistics. I sat on the front porch of my new house, a modest place, but one with a garden I finally had time to tend. The sun was setting, casting long, golden shadows across the lawn. My phone buzzed on the table. It was a notification from the bank. The first quarterly payment from the licensing deal had hit. It was more than I had made in 10 years at the old job. The transition hadn't been easy. ShopQuick declared Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Daniel was facing SEC charges for the crypto scheme, but out of the ashes, we salvaged the engine. I had formed an LLC with Theo. We bought the hardware and the IP rights from the bankruptcy court for pennies on the dollar, using my unpaid consulting invoice as leverage. Then, we leased the service back to the big logistics firm that had wanted to buy the company in the first place. They got the tech, I got the control, I hired Aaliyah to run operations. I even hired Tyler, on a probationary basis, to fix his messy code, though he now reported to me, and he actually listened when I spoke. I took a sip of iced tea and looked at the camera, breaking the fourth wall one last time. You know, for years, I believed that if I just kept my head down and did good work, I would be rewarded. I thought that being essential meant I was safe. I was wrong. The mistake I made wasn't working hard. It was letting someone else define the value of that work. I let Daniel Murphy convince me that because I wasn't flashy, I wasn't important. I let him call me low impact because I was too afraid to show him what high impact actually looked like. Here is what I learned and what you need to know. First, document your value. Don't just do the work, keep a record of it. If you save the company money, write it down. If you prevent a disaster, timestamp it. When they ask, "What do you do?" have the binder ready. Second, own your skills. My personal notes were my intellectual property. They were the product of my experience. Never give away your unique knowledge for free to people, WH. Oh, don't respect it. Third, trust but verify. I trusted the company to look out for me. They didn't. Always have an emergency fund, your screw you money, so you can walk away when the disrespect becomes dangerous. And finally, don't be afraid to be the legacy system. New isn't always better. Flashy isn't always functional. Sometimes, the person keeping the lights on is the most powerful person in the room. Just make sure you're the one holding the switch. I smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile.